Today is Wednesday, November 18th, 2020. And not only would it be a great day for the Chicago Bears to fire team president Ted Phillips, it is NBA Draft Day. Whoopee whoop hooray. How weird is that? We're talking about the NBA Draft the week before Thanksgiving. That's 2020 for you. So I am here with my final 2020 NBA mock draft. You can check out all 30 picks of round one in the description box below. And I'm going to start off by saying a couple of things. Number one, it's all a guess. Like, you could say mock drafts are typically a guess, but this one really, truly feels like a guess. It is just really, really hard to know. And I think some of that this year is owed to the fact that we don't have a clear-cut, absolute top number one player to kind of set everything else in order. I think that is true. I think number two, you're in kind of this unique environment where you've got a team that you expect to be a contender next year with guys like Clay and Steph coming back from injury and the Golden State Warriors sitting there picking at number two. Hard to know what they're going to do. You're hearing a lot of talk about the Minnesota Timberwolves not wanting to pick number one. So you got a lot of questions and confusion there. You also got Charlotte. Who knows what the hell the Hornets are ever going to do. You got the Bulls with the new front office. Who knows what they're going to do. You can guess based off of what their history was in Denver, but that's no guarantee of anything in Chicago. And I think part of that is, too, like when we talk about these evaluations, it's been so long since we've seen some of these guys. So that's a problem or a challenge. Not to mention that we didn't get the NCAA tournament this year. So this would have been a place for several of these players, several of these top prospects, to really show out and ball out and play big on the biggest stage and help us kind of differentiate some of those guys. We don't have that. Like, we're missing some key games in terms of the story of these guys as the prospects, and especially from an evaluation process. So a really kind of unique type of draft situation that we're seeing this year. But I'm going to come back to the first thing I kind of talked about is I have no clue what's going to happen. And I don't think a lot of other people do. We've already seen a pretty active trade market, both in terms of players moving, such as Drew Holiday going to the Bucks, Bogdanovich going to the Bucks, Dennis Schroeder going to the Lakers from the Thunder. You've seen multiple picks already being dealt. Like, there's already been a lot of action. I anticipate that there certainly is going to be a lot more action the rest of today, after I record this, on up through the rest of the day, including the whole NBA draft. Like, I expect there's going to be plenty more action between the time this uploads and the draft even starts, let alone by the time the draft completes. So certainly a lot of this is going to change. So what I'm doing here, I'm not even necessarily really doing this mock draft based off of the teams and where they're at, because some of these picks, while the team that originally held them will technically make the pick or the selection, a couple of these picks have already moved. Like, I think the Portland pick already moved to Houston. The Lakers picks already moved to Oklahoma City. The Knicks, earlier today, I believe, moved up from 27 to 23. Like, there are already several moves there, so I'm not even going to bother trying to factor any of those in or project any trades. I might talk about some of the possibilities, but I'm just going to kind of slot in guys based off of draft positioning more than team or fit than anything else, except in some cases. I'm going to start off with the Minnesota Timberwolves at number one. If the Minnesota Timberwolves don't want to pick number one because they think they can get a player in this draft of similar value at, let's say, 4 or 5 or even 3 compared to number one, and they want to also acquire some additional draft pick capital, I 100% understand that. I 100% agree with that philosophy and approach in this year's draft, and I 100% support that. If they do not want to pick number one overall because they are trigger shy, if they are afraid, if they don't have confidence that they've got the evaluation right, and they're worried that they're going to take the guy that's not the best player in the draft, then you should be immediately firing everybody involved with the Minnesota Timberwolves front office, period. You don't sit there and hire people that don't have the confidence of knowing what the hell they're doing to make the right selection here. Now, the right choice might be to trade back and get some additional capital in this draft. I would agree with that. But if the T-Wolves stay at number one, it should be down to Lamelo Ball and Anthony Edwards. And personally, I might lean a little bit more towards Anthony Edwards on the one hand because I think he has more elite scoring potential. Like, this is a guy that has 25-plus point per game scoring potential, maybe up to 30 point per game scoring potential, depending on the team, the situation, the offense, the talent around him, and so forth, and other factors. But I think in terms of fit, like, there's a significant amount of upside there with Lamelo Ball. I still think there's a significant amount of risk. I don't know that he's so much better than some of the other point guards in this draft that it necessarily merits him going number 1 overall, but I can certainly understand it. And if you want some star power and you want to swing for the fences, then Lamelo Ball should be the pick for the Minnesota Timberwolves. I would also certainly support them taking Anthony Edwards, because this is a wing-dominated league. I worry a little bit about Anthony Edwards. Defensive effort at times, certainly questionable, although I think the skill is there. It's more about the will. He's got the alpha dog mentality, but then you worry about shot selection, and he's kind of streaky up and down as a shooter at times. Actually, the biggest thing I think that worries me is, again, you're talking about 19, 20-year-old kids. So some of the stuff you work through and develop over time, it's the landing on his 1 foot, landing on his left leg when he's taking his jumpers. He does that a lot, kind of like a Tracy McGrady or some other guys. That's the type of stuff that worries me that long-term in his career might not impact him right away, but you could have some future durability concerns, some future knee problems from consistently landing on 1 leg on your jumper. So that's the thing that would concern me a little bit. LaMelo's had a lot of growth in his game the past 2 or 3 years. You got to separate him from his brother Lonzo because I think they're slightly different players, although there are similarities, that is for sure. But if the T-Wolves have guts and have balls, you take LaMelo Ball number 1 overall. That's what you do. Then we get to the Warriors at 2. And there's been a lot of talk, so I'll talk about my Bulls here as well, that the Warriors and Bulls might be talking about a trade between picks 2 and 4, and the Bulls potentially sending Wendell Carter Jr. to the Warriors to move up to 2 and then taking James Wiseman. Let me be clear. If the Warriors take James Wiseman, well, I don't think he's the best player on the board, or necessarily the best player on the board for them at that point. I understand it. I understand that they're in a position where, they're not just drafting automatically for the guy that might be the best 8 or 10 years down the road. Like, they're looking for some guys that can contribute and bring something different right away. I get that for the Warriors with Wiseman. The Chicago Bulls trading up from 4 to 2 to take him would be absolutely dumb dick stupidity of the highest Krause order. Now you'd be talking about trying to build your team around a big man. Is he even the best big man in this draft? Is he even the best NBA big man in this draft? Let alone, that's taking a step 15, 20 years back. Oh, we really like Elton Brand. Oh, we really like Marcus Fizer. Psych. We really like Tyson Chandler and Eddie Curry. Like, you're just spinning your wheels when you do this crap. If you're going to make a trade up, then you make a trade up to get a guy like a LaMelo or an Anthony Edwards, somebody that brings you something different, something that more fits the modern NBA game in terms of where you win at. You don't win with centers, period. Not when you're trying to make them into star players and star pieces. The Bulls need a franchise player out of this draft. I just don't believe Wiseman is that guy. And even if he develops into it, still, what does that mean? In a couple of years, you might be the Sixers. Well, skip-de-skip, whoop-de-woo, who gives a crap? Who wants to be them? The Sixers don't want to be the Sixers. So why the hell would AK want to make the Bulls the Sixers? It's dumb. If the Warriors make that deal, though, and potentially can get Wendell Carter Jr., and move back 2 spots and still take Avdija, they'd be clowns not to get that deal done. Entirely different perspective. If the Warriors stay put, I could make an argument for them taking Avdija too, because I think he's a wonderful fit for what they do, and I still think he has a tremendous amount of upside, the young man from Israel. But if they take Wiseman, at least I can understand it. But if they're able to trade back and still get Avdija at 4, are you kidding me? Huge. The Hornets at 3, if they're in a spot where they apparently like James Wiseman, so if he happens to fall there at 3, they take him. Okay. Again, not who I would take there, but I get it. If LaMelo's there at 3, then they could take him. If Anthony Edwards falls at 3, the Hornets take him. The best thing for the Hornets to do in this spot is you have 3 guys that are kind of widely viewed as the top tier of this draft, even though I don't totally agree with it. That's a general consensus. It's Ball, Wiseman, Edwards in some particular order. Those are typically thought of as the top 3 guys in this draft. If you're the Hornets, you're picking 3rd. You're guaranteed to get one of those top 3 guys. Don't move up. Don't move down. Stand pat and take the player that falls to you at 3. That's simple. For the Cavs at 4, Obi Toppin, certainly I think makes some sense, especially if Avdija is off the board. For them, they're probably looking for some type of big that can score. There's a kid that played at Dayton. He's a guy that on a bad team could put up some big numbers right away. So maybe a little bit of box office appeal there, especially with some of the spectacular dunks he could throw down. So Toppin, I think, for the Cavs, for an organization that needs some life and some juice, especially in their front court, he makes a world of sense. I've also heard some reports for the Bulls, circling back to my team here at 4, talking about that they really like Patrick Williams. I see a better shooting Tyrese Thomas. You don't take those guys 4th overall. That's dumb. Dumb. Who knows what the hell could happen? If the draft went based off the way I have it now, and you didn't have other big moves that happened, I would love the Knicks getting Killian Hayes at number 8. I don't see where there's that dramatic of a gulf there between Ball and Hayes, where one goes 1 and the other goes 8. But if the Knicks were somehow, some way able to get him at 8, they got to feel really good about themselves, potentially doing some backflips. Although, with the deal that they just made to move up from 27 to 23, it makes you think that they're trying to move up into that top 5, maybe to where Cleveland is, or maybe even to where Atlanta is at 6, and packaging up 8 and 23 to do that. So I'd be surprised if the Knicks don't make another move up. But, to me, Killian Hayes certainly makes a lot of sense. What I would love in an ideal world, just from a sex appeal of the draft standpoint and something to get us buzzing, I would love for the Knicks to be able to put together a package where they go all the way up to number 1 and they end up with Lamelo Ball. It feels like that's what we need out of this draft. I just don't think it's going to happen. But when I look at this draft, this is a draft that's pretty good on wings, pretty light on big men, and that's the way it should be. When you look at the modern NBA, it's about the wings, it's about the stretch 4s, it's about those point guards that can distribute and shoot. It's not about those low post 4s and 5s anymore. And you see the draft is reflecting that in a lot of ways. So if you're looking for guys in that type of spot, then you absolutely are happy to have a first-round pick, or in some teams' cases, multiple first-round picks. You've got some international flavor here. You got Pokusevski, you've got Maledon, you've got Bolmaro. You've got a few of these international guys. You've got the RJ Hampton kid who played internationally. You got a few of these international players sprinkled into, so if teams want to do a draft and stash, they can do that. Or if they want to gamble on the higher upside and have the patience to wait 2 or 3 years for it to start to manifest and develop, there's something for most everybody here in this draft. My whole consensus or thought here is for some of these teams, be really careful moving up in this type of draft. Because even when I talk about the top 3 players, I don't think in any way that there is an absolute consensus on that. I really don't, other than from your media heads and so forth. So if you don't have a consensus top 3 and you start going from 4 to 14 in this draft, I just don't see where there's a ton of difference. Depending on systems and depending on fits, different guys could pan out a little bit better. But I also think this is a draft that you could look back in 3 or 4 years and you could say there's going to be 1 or 2 guys that were taken between 4 and 14 that are better than at least 1, if not 2, or if not all 3 of the guys that were taken 1, 2, and 3 in this draft. I think that is certainly possible. So I 100% understand and support some of these teams that might want to peel back a little bit in the lottery. And I, in most cases, do not understand in any way, shape, or form why teams would be so desperate to move up unless they're making a big move up the board. But even if they're making a big move up the board, you look at so many of these positions, you've got plenty of point guards that project well for the next level. You have plenty of wings, plenty of D and 3 guys that project well for the next level. There just is no reason to move up and give up future assets or players to move higher in this draft. Just stand pat and take the player that you think best fits, that has the best talent that falls to you. That should be the draft philosophy for all these teams. And especially if the Bulls are thinking about trading up from 4 to 2 just to get Wiseman, stay put. Stop that. It's supposed to be different. It's supposed to be better. It's not supposed to be goddamn run it back to Jerry Krause days of the 2000s. It's enough. You can let me know what you think about my mock in the comments below. I'll be back shortly after the draft to give you my reactions and thoughts and insights on what happened during this 2020 NBA draft.